Hi, welcome to IELTS Not Live because I can't get our stream working through Facebook, but don't worry. We're still going to do our lessons, so that's okay. I am Melanie. I am the co-founder of Bounce English, and I am so excited that you are watching this. Today, this class is all about IELTS. It's about a 10 to 15 minute class. It's about IELTS listening. So I'm going to give you some secrets and I'm going to give you some tips, and I hope that they really help you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen with you. So I'm sharing. For more tips and lessons, if you like what you see, follow us on Facebook. We do live lessons every Wednesday. And go to Instagram, follow us on Instagram at Bounce English, or visit us at bounceenglish.rocks, all places where you can get more content and sign up for our classes. We'd love to teach you because I'm so happy you're here. Okay, let's do this, shall we? Let me share my screen. We're going to do a slideshow. Welcome to Tips for IELTS Listening. I am super excited. I am your host, Melanie Johnson, co-founder of Bounce English. Let's do it. In the next half hour or so, 15, 20 minutes, half hour, kind of a bite size while you're on your lunch break, while you're having your coffee, you will review what we've learned so far, because this is our fourth class on secret tips for IELTS. You will look at how the IELTS listening test is organized, and you'll learn a few tips on how to maximize your IELTS score. Does that sound awesome, or does that sound awesome? Are you ready? Great. Then let's do this. High five me. I just learned this week that in China, a high five is called, I'm just moving so I'm a little more comfortable as I teach you. I just learned this week that in China, a high five is called a cloud, like a virtual, if we're doing like this because we are in different places. This kind of high five is called a cloud high five. How fun. Okay, so I learned something. Now hopefully I can teach you some things. Let's do this. So the first thing you need to know is I just want to review with you how the IELTS exam is organized. And if you remember, there are 4 sections, okay? So section 1 is the listening section. It's for it has 4 separate sections, and the whole test takes about 40 minutes. You actually go through the test itself in 30, then you have 10 minutes to check your answer, which will be important later in this lesson. So remember that you have a 30-minute test, and then you have 10 minutes to check your answer. Then you have the reading. You have the IELTS reading section. That's an hour to complete 3 reading passages. We spoke about that a few weeks ago. Last week we talked about the IELTS writing, where you get 2 different tasks. You have 1 hour to complete them. And then there's also the IELTS speaking section, which might take place the same day you do the rest of the test. It might take place the day before, or the day after, or even a couple days before or after. But it is only 12 to 15 minutes, and there are 3 parts to it. We spoke about that a few weeks ago, so go ahead and check out some of our old videos if you want to learn more about that, or contact me, M. Johnson at bounceenglish.rocks. I'd love to talk to you about IELTS. I am the IELTS queen. I love it. Okay. Now, if you remember, there are 2 different types of IELTS tests. There is a general training test. The general training test is used for general purposes. Purposes like getting a job. You want to get a job and you need a certain qualification for that. It is also used for immigrating. Sorry, I'm an English teacher, but I can't speak English. For certain types of immigration purposes that you might need it for. But usually if you're taking the general training test, there's a more general life reason you need to take it, as opposed to the academic section, which is used primarily for university entrance to show that your English is at a level acceptable for a specific university or acceptance into particular academic programs. So for example, people who want to go into medicine and want to become doctors, they usually need a slightly higher IELTS score, like a 7.5 or even an 8. And sometimes a program will specify, like, we want you to get at least a 7.5 in writing or something like that. But other universities, if you're maybe going for undergrad, a lot of times they want you to have around a 6.5, but they might specify, especially a more competitive university might want you to have a higher score. But that's why we use academic. I feel like I'm getting a little off the topic. Maybe that's something to talk about a different time. But remember that you've got four different test parts, and then you have 2 different types of IELTS tests. But guess what? Guess what? It's all connected, actually. It's all connected. Every part of the IELTS test is connected to another part of the test. So it's not like you just take the IELTS writing and then nothing else you do on the IELTS test has anything to do with that. No. You'll take the IELTS writing, but there's another question that will be similar to that in a different section. So for example, tests that you do in one part of the test, or sorry, I'm not explaining this one. Let me start over. For example, if you take the IELTS writing test, task 2 is a question that is kind of about a broad topic that you need to give your opinion on. So it's not personal, it's about kind of an abstract or general topic that you give your opinion on. For example, how are computers being used for school helpful or harmful, for example. This is related to, any guesses? Do you know? Speaking, task 3. Task 3 for speaking also asks you general questions related to kind of abstract topics. So my point is the tests that you do in one part of the test are actually similar to tasks that you will do in another different part of the test, okay? And for listening, I think that's really, really important. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I mean. So what do these connections have to do with listening? Well, actually, remember that some people who are doing the listening, everybody doing the listening is doing the same listening, whether they're doing IELTS for academic purposes or whether they're doing it for general training. So what that means is some sections of the IELTS listening have an academic focus. And then other sections of the listening have a general focus. I guess that's the IELTS way of making the test appropriate for everyone. Also, the question types that you get are related to tasks that you might do in writing. So for example, one thing you might need to do on the IELTS listening is label parts of a map. This is a really common IELTS question. IELTS listening question where you're listening to something, maybe they have like 3 graphs and you have to decide, are they describing graph A, B, or C? Sometimes you might actually have a map or a timeline and then you're labeling that. Well, that is directly related to IELTS task 1 for academic training, for academic purposes. Also, some of the question types that you get are similar to types of questions that you might get on IELTS reading. So for example, you might get summary completion. Summary completion is a really typical type of question that you get for listening. You might also get short answer. Okay, so where you're just writing a short answer, or you might have multiple choice. So these same questions appear on IELTS reading too. It's just obviously when you see them on IELTS reading, you are using your reading skills, skimming, scanning, reading in detail to find the answers. And then when you're doing this for IELTS listening, you are using different skills. Everybody with me? No one asleep? Great, hooray, high five, virtual high five, or cloud high five, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so now let's get into it. Let's talk about the sections of IELTS listening. So part 1 is always a conversation between two people. So this could be someone calling a call center to talk about a credit card bill, or somebody talking to someone else about an apartment they want to rent, or making arrangements with someone to help them do something, or planning a party. These are all really typical task 1 topics, but notice that they're general topics. Get it? They're general for general purposes. But that's always part 1. Part 1, always conversation between two people about a general topic. Part 2 is always a long turn. What do I mean when I say long turn? That means one person will be talking for a longer time. And what will they be talking about? A general topic. So the topic could be how I learned to quit smoking. The topic could be a news report about something that's going on in the local area. The topic could be, I don't know, I can't think of it, about a contest and explaining how the contest is going to work. But notice all of the topics are general, and you will be speaking for, the person will be speaking for a long time. Now, these parts 3 and parts 4 are the academic sections. So part 3 is also a conversation. There are usually more than 2 people, but sometimes the conversation is between 2 people. I think actually, now that I think about it, I've never heard one where it's just 2 people. It's usually at least 3 people, but the topic's always academic. So the topic could be results of someone's research. It could be a professor and some students talking about a paper. It could be a tutorial. It could be a meeting about an orientation session. Or it could be students talking about a project they're working on, but it's always going to be a conversation. Oh yeah, I have heard one with 2 people now that I think about it. Usually between 2, maybe 3 people, and it will be about an academic topic. And then finally, part 4 is always an academic lecture. So always somebody talking about some sort of academic thing. And guess what? The topic is always, when I think about it, remember when I said everything's connected, it reminds me of IELTS reading, actually. The topics are kind of like the types of things you might get on IELTS reading. So I'm just thinking about a few I've heard. Charles Dickens is one. Bullying at work is another. These are all types of topics that you might hear on IELTS reading too. And again, things that they're trying to make sure nobody has an unfair advantage of knowing. It's unlikely that you're going to have a Charles Dickens expert taking the IELTS listening. I suppose it could happen. It certainly could. But anyway, those are the 4 sections of the IELTS listening. Here are, oh shoot, that is an old slide. My bad. I meant to take that out. Here we go. Here is something important to know. The test gets progressively harder. Part 1 is the easiest and part 4 is the hardest. Okay, so remember that first section should be the easiest for you, but then the last section is going to be hardest. Sometimes you might find a particular section was harder for you than another. That's okay. That's life. It happens. But in general, that's how it's supposed to work, that it gets kind of gradually harder as you go. So what do you do to manage this? How can you cope with this? Guess what? I have some tips for you. Here are my tips. First of all, read the questions first. Always read the questions first. And remember to read the instructions too, because the instructions are going to tell you things like, how many words can you use? Are you allowed to use a word? Or does a word count as a number? Is it word and or a number? These are really important things to know for answering the questions. Are there any possibilities you can eliminate? Sometimes you might have multiple choice and they give you an example and you can cross it out. That is very useful. So make sure that you read the instructions and read the questions first. Reading the questions is going to help you with the number one skill to help you do great on IELTS listening, and that is using prediction to help you find the answer. Now, what do I mean when I say prediction? I mean you try and guess what you're going to hear before you hear it. We actually already do this. We already do this in our native languages all the time. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine that you're at a busy airport and you're going to Sydney, Australia, and you're flying Qantas, okay? So you're waiting for your flight, busy airport, and you're actually waiting to find out what gate you will be at. Okay, so you hear, attention, the Qantas flight to, as soon as you hear Qantas, listening. You're listening because you're on that flight. So you're waiting for your gate. You know that they're going to give you that information soon. And so you're listening, okay? The Qantas flight to Melbourne. Okay, stop listening now because you need information on the Qantas flight to Sydney. But if you keep listening, you hear something like, attention, all passengers going to Sydney. Okay, now I'm listening. They're talking about something that's useful for Sydney. I'm predicting they're going to say something that's important for me to hear. So now I am listening, okay? The flight to Sydney will be delayed for all Air France pass. Air France. Now I can stop listening, okay? So you predict all the time in your own language. Imagine another example that you want to have lunch with a friend. So you call your friend and you say, hey, how's it going? Would you like to have lunch tomorrow with me? And your friend says, well, I have kind of a busy morning. I'm going to be going to the doctor. Then I'm going to the grocery store. So as soon as you hear okay, they're going to now tell me. Everything they said before, not so important. When you hear now I'm listening because my answer will be here. So then they say, so yes, but I have to be a little later. Okay. Or so no, I really can't. Okay. You're using predictive skills all the time in your native language, and you need to use them on the IELTS listening test. Do you want to know a secret? I have been helping people with IELTS for almost 20 years. I would consider myself an IELTS expert. English is my mother tongue, but if I am doing an IELTS listening test with students, if I don't predict the answers, I get questions wrong. So you must take that time to predict. It will definitely help your score. Also, sometimes you miss an answer, sometimes you don't understand and you miss it. all of the answers are in order. They're in order of the listening. So if you miss one, just move ahead. Just move ahead. Don't worry about it. You'll get another chance to look at that question, and I will tell you when you get it. Okay, so those are some tips. Here are a few more tips. Use the 10 minutes that you get wisely. Okay, remember, you have 30, this test is 30 minutes, and then you have 10 minutes to transfer your answers, okay? When you have that 10 minutes, you definitely want to do a few things. First, you want to check your grammar and spelling. Why? Because if your grammar or spelling is wrong, the answer will be marked wrong, even if it's right. Even if you actually wrote the right answer, okay? And speaking of that, if you choose a different word and it's technically right, but it's not the word the person said, it's going to be wrong, okay? If you have the right answer, but you haven't followed the instructions, remember I said read the instructions? So maybe your answer has 4 words, but the answer is only 3. It's going to be wrong, even if it's right, okay? Annoying. I know, it's annoying, but that's how it goes. And finally, use the time to transfer answers, that time to guess answers that you missed the first time. So when you're transferring, okay, take some time and try and guess. How can you guess? Well, you've already listened to it once. Plus, you can see the sentence. So you can guess if the word, like, is it missing a noun? Is it missing a verb? Those things help. Does a word pop in your mind? Then write it down, okay? That's use that time. Use that time really wisely. And remember, spelling counts, okay? I'm now actually going to leave you with a story because sometimes, I think the tests vary in difficulty. So you might feel that you didn't do so well on the test. You might do great. I had a student who took the IELTS listening. She came back on the Monday. I said, how was the test? She said, oh, it was terrible. I didn't understand anything. Well, guess what? She got an 8. After feeling like she couldn't understand anything, she got an 8. So my point is, just follow those tips and do your best. You don't know how well you could have done, okay? That's it. Thank you so much for watching this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to check us out every Wednesday on Facebook. I'm always doing IELTS lessons there from 11 to about 11:30 California time. So check out whatever time, what time is it in California? That's the time you want to be there. And you can also follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram. We're at Bounce English. Or visit us at bounceenglish.rocks for your own lessons and classes we would love to teach you. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Mwah.